Hey guys, how you going? So today on BKRsport, we are back here for a season review of every single club in the NRL, all 17 teams. Obviously, some teams are still cracking on, which is why we'll leave them until a little bit later. Right now, we're currently going through the bottom 9. Yesterday, we did put out the West Tigers season review with their third wooden spoon in a row, unfortunately. Gave you the positives of their season, the negatives of their season, things to be excited about, things to be concerned about, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing here today. Obviously, guys, you may have a different opinion to me. Please use the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. Because at the end of the day, these are just my thoughts. You know, you are entitled to your opinion just like I'm entitled to my opinion. I'm not doing this to offend any club or offend any team. I'm just giving you the positives and negatives that I see fit, especially considering that I am a fan of a different team. I am a fan of the Gold Coast Titans, which we'll get to in 2 reviews time, because we are kind of going up the ladder. But today, guys, we do have the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Wowee. What a roller coaster of a season they had. Very, very interesting. And this one's going to be quite significant to talk about, right? Because the South Sydney Rabbitohs come into this season with a very high expectation, very high hopes, and I believed in them, to be completely honest with you. I think that when you look at their team on paper, actually, let's even go over to the players section here. And let's go and have a look at their team on paper, because this will decide and show you a lot about the injuries that they've had this season, the difficulties that they've faced, being able to put together things at times, but also failing a lot throughout this season as well, right? Now, obviously, Adam Christensen, depth. They've got Benjamin Lovett, depth. Brock Gray is depth. Cameron Murray, their big-time 13. Probably one of their best players throughout this season. You've got, I won't go through the depth players. Damien Cook, obviously a representative for Australia, representative in Origin prior. Didn't play this year, but a fantastic player. David Mawali, huge, big front row forward there. Jacob Host, who's had a lot to do with their season in the back row. Jai Arrow has been quite injured throughout this season, to be fair. Keon Kolomatangi, fantastic player. You know, we're naming some huge players here across the competition. Let's go through some more. Saliva Havili is representative for Tonga as well, and has been more of a kind of rotation depth hooker, but has been injured a bit as well, but doesn't really necessarily get to that next level, but does still have a solid enough name. Alex Johnston, one of the highest try-scoring wingers in the history of rugby league. Campbell Graham, this is a big one here, obviously injured for the majority of this season. Cody Walker, huge name in the game. You go down to the depth as well, and you look at guys like Isaiah Tass, who has been a part of their club for a few years now and has been one of their main centres, but obviously they have signed guys like Jack Whiten, wherever his name is. There he is, right there. Jack Whiten from the Canberra Raiders. Jai Gray really came into the scene this year, which was great to see. Lachlan Ilias, very controversial polar opposite opinions that people do have in regards to Ilias. Obviously has been injured as well. However, very much aligned with the Jason Demetrio situation as well. Latrell Mitchell, we all know Trolley Boy, Tana Milne, and a couple of these guys also depth that they've had to utilise because they have had so many injuries throughout the season. So it is good to be able to look at this and see the kind of players they have had to work with, but also it does remind you how many injuries that they have had throughout the season as well. So it has been a very, very frustrating one because, as you can see here in the ladder, they came 16th. You know, they did come second last, very, very close to coming last. But the thing is that was lucky for them was that they had that Eels and Tigers game that regardless who won and regardless who lost, they were going to be finishing in second last. Or maybe actually not, sorry. The Tigers would have more than likely been finishing in second last, and the Rabbitohs would have been third last. So they actually really wanted the Tigers to win that game, so the Eels stayed below them, and the Eels would have obviously won that wooden spoon. But Rabbitohs fans would not be appreciating and liking the fact that right now I'm talking about them in 16th position. You know, because before the season started, I think I had this team in a top 5 position. I think I had them in 5th, if I'm not mistaken, because I did think that they would start the season off really, really slow. They were adjusting to the new signing Jack White, which we'll get into the signings in a second, but they would adjust into, a new season. Wasn't necessarily confident with Jason Demetrio. Obviously, guys, Jason Demetrio was their coach post Wayne Bennett. It hadn't worked out. It didn't work out throughout the season. He was fired. Caretaker took over. And we know that Wayne Bennett is coming in next year, which does give you some hope, gives you some belief, because there is the team here to actually go and do something. Because I think even 4, 5, 6 weeks into the competition, I was still expecting the Rabbitohs to come home strongly. And I think that I did a video, a live stream, where I did predictions for the rest of the year through the NRL draw predictor. And I think I had the Rabbitohs come home and win it over the Roosters. I think I did. I'm pretty certain I did, because I wasn't convinced in the Storm or whatnot at the time. And I just felt like the Panthers were not the same team, but still could do it. They got to the prelim. I was more confident in the Rabbitohs that they would just come home like a train. And there was a point of the year where you go back and have a look at their draw. There was a point of the year here where they did start to get a bit of a roll on. They really did. It was from round 12 until round 18. Round 12 until round 18. You could even argue round 12 until round 20 minus this Dolphins game here. But still, they had a decent enough score in that game. But with that being said, I did outline that at the time that was probably going to be, you know, the down track of what was a positive part of the mid-season. And we all knew this was going to happen. But then obviously they fell away towards the back end of the year. But we will go through their draw in a second. So yeah, look, overall, looking from a pure, you know, wins and losses and ladder positioning standing point, they come in 16th position, 2 points above the West Tigers, who have been widely criticised for winning 3 wooden spoons in a row now. And they did finish below the Parramatta Eels, who could have also been there as well, due to points differential. They had minus 188 points on the points differential. The Eels minus 155, the Tigers minus 287, which was what kind of guaranteed the Rabbitohs to stay above them regardless. But they did have a better points differential. No, that's the only team, actually. They're second worst on points differential, right? So they won 7 games this year. They lost 17 games this year, which is only 1 more win than the West Tigers. So that is a very concerning standing point. And I'm sorry, Tigers fans, to continuously bring you up, but I do need to kind of really show that polar opposite expectation to reality for the South Sydney Rabbitohs, where they're expecting to play in a grand final. They're expecting to be a top 14, top 5, top 6 team, and then finishing in second last. So there is a reason for that. They did score 494 points this year, which is actually, it's not terrible, to be fair. Like, comparatively, considering their positioning, they scored more points than the Tigers. They did score more points than the Titans. They scored more points than the Raiders and also the Knights, who were a top 8 team. So despite the fact that they did have all these injuries and whatnot, they actually did finish out of the bottom 4 for attack. Defensively, it was third worst, right? So they were worse than the Eels and they were worse than the Tigers. 682 points given up is really not good. But they are relatively close to, you know, teams like the Titans and teams like the Dragons and whatnot. No one in the top 8, though, which is where you see where defense wins premierships, guys. This is what we say all the time. Defense wins premierships. Look at all these teams who are in the top 8. 449, 394 for the Panthers, 463 for the Roosters, 431 Sharks, 568 Cowboys, which is on the higher end, much higher end. Actually, the worst defensive team in the top 8. You got Bulldogs on 433, 521 there for the Sea Eagles, and 510 there for the Knights, comparatively to 682, nearly 700 points through the 24 games for the Rabbitohs. So, yeah, it's very concerning there in regards to the defensive standing point, but there were relative excuses. But then again, everyone has relative excuses, right? Everybody does. Every single team does. Maybe except for the Tigers. That comes down to the decision-making in regards to the roster. Now, let's go have a look at the draw that they had this season, because I feel like we're going to see a lot of struggle, but I also feel like we're going to see some glued together results, right? Which just came randomly that gave them some hope, and then, you know, they go back to the losing ways, right? So they start off the season really difficultly. They play Manly over in Vegas, which, you know, the Rabbitohs were relatively in that game, did get beaten by a team that did finish in the top 8, but you look through this top 5 here in regards to results the first 5 games. Lost to Manly, top 8. Lost to the Broncos, who at the time were coming off a grand final and needed to win after their loss to the Roosters in week 1. We did not know how poor that result is considering the season. But with that being said, the Broncos were a better team at the beginning part of the year before they fell away. They were really just inconsistent this year, the Broncos. Obviously got thumped by the Roosters there. They did beat the Bulldogs, which is impressive considering how they've kind of panned out their season. Then lost the Warriors and lost the Sharks. And then got thumped here. Actually, no, we're going to separate these 3. We're going to separate those 3. So, you know, the Warriors, the Bulldogs, the Roosters, the Broncos, and the Manly Sea Eagles. Coming into this season, that's a very, very tough schedule besides what we thought about the Bulldogs, because the Warriors also made the prelim last year. Not great results here, and especially considering where the Warriors have finished up this year. That's an awful result. So yeah, really, I thought that was okay, and it more so expected with the injury to like Campbell Graham, with the inclusion. I think Jack Whiten was out suspended as well for a little bit there, and also they were under their previous coach with Jason Demetrio. So it wasn't terrible. Looking back at it now, it is, but it wasn't terrible at the time. But then this is where you start to really recognise what the Rabbitohs were, because they got 34 points put past them by the Sharks whilst the Rabbitohs were at home, had a bye, got thumped by the Melbourne Storm 54-20, and then got thumped by the Panthers 42-12. 28-14 is a pretty good thumping. Got close to the Cowboys, but still gave it 28 points there. Scored 42-26 over the Eels, which was good on an Indigenous round, which is very important to the Rabbitohs. But overall, this area here, they just went on a run of pretty big losses. Pretty big losses, right? And that really just hounded in, because from their first part of the year, 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 1-3, 1-4, 1-5. That's included by 2-5 from the first 7. 2-6, 2-7, 2-8. And this is still, like, take away the bye, it's 1-8, right? Or 1-7, sorry. And then the Cowboys, so that's 2-9. And then obviously they get to this little section here, which we will get into. But that opening part of the season really set the precedent and the standard for what Rabbitohs' year was to come. And that's why we obviously did see the changes that were being made. But Rabbitohs fans can't be happy with that. They can't be happy with that, but you can, going into next year, attribute that to the previous organisation, administration of Jason Demetrio and the way that the club was being handled. They then go on and switch on to beat the Eels and score 42 points. And this game here was really important for them. So obviously this is against my team, the Gold Coast Titans. The Titans were heavy favourites. The Rabbitohs were dead last at this very point going into this game. And they needed to turn up. They had Trell Mitt there. They had Jackie White there. They had most of their players back in for this game. And came and thumped us at the Gold Coast, right? Thumped us. Titans were pretty decent favourites. I think we were coming off our win against the Broncos at Suncorp, if I'm not mistaken. And the Rabbitohs weren't considered hopefuls to win that game at all, but they just always beat us there and whooped us after that Eels game, right? Because this wasn't the best representation for a result. Both those teams were, I think, last and second last at the time. So yeah, Eels were close enough anyway. I think Tigers were second last. But point of matter is that this was a really, really big point for them, and then beat the Broncos as well, and then beat Manly, and then beat the Rabbitohs again. But not the Rabbitohs, they beat the Eels again, right? The issue here that people weren't recognising at the time was that the Eels were in like second, third last at the time. The Titans were like fourth last or third last at the time. The Broncos were looking atrocious at that point, and actually in this was like their second or third game out of their like 2.5 month losing streak, right? They played Manly without all of Manly's players. Like Manly had Origin players out, injuries, everything galore. So that's not a true representation. And they beat the Eels again. Actually, I think the Eels were last at that point. I'm pretty certain the Eels were last at this point because I remember talking about it there. So those 5 game stretch there was against teams that either had excuses with injuries and Origin and whatnot, or just weren't that good. And just were in lowly positions. So, people really, truly just focused in on the fact they were getting the result, which you can only play who's in front of you, but there was a lot more context involved there as well. And then towards the back end of the year, after that Eels game, they started playing a bit better opposition, and the Dolphins, who obviously got close to the 8, they beat the Dolphins. So the Dolphins beat them. They played the Tigers, which is an expectation to beat. They still conceded 28 points in that game, mind you. Lost the Raiders, the Sharks, the Storm, the Tigers, the team that you were expected to beat just before, the Knights, the Panthers, and then got whooped by your biggest rivals in the Roosters. So 7 losses straight to finish off the season. So you go back and look through that year. I would say the Tigers had more positives in regards to the sizable wins that they had, but the Rabbitohs did have more reason to say, okay, well, hold on a second, we do have injuries, we had a changing of administration and whatnot. And you can see the difference. I think when Wayne Bennett signed was around this point, or it could have even been around this point. The point matter is that when they started winning games again, that was when the knowledge of Demetrio out, Caretaker, and Wayne Bennett coming in. So, really disappointing year. Really disappointing year for the Rabbitohs, obviously, results-wise. Didn't have it easy to start off the year. Didn't also have it easy to finish off the year with the fact their last 2 games were against top 4 opposition, the Panthers, 3-time premiers, and also the Roosters, who are a top 4 team. Even well, you wouldn't have thought this early on, but the Knights are a gritty team and fought their way into the top 8, obviously, and finishing 8th. And then, like I said, losing this game is ridiculous. And even the Storm game, really, really hard. Sharks game up there, really, really difficult. But this game here really encapsulated this area, right? So that's my thoughts on the Rabbitohs season. A lot more downs than ups. When they did have their ups in this area here, when they had their ups, the teams they were playing weren't that great. And you could clearly see that three of those teams were bottom 4. Broncos, I think, were like 5th last at the time. So the teams they were playing, Eels twice, who were in last, Titans, who were in bottom 4, Manly with no players, and Broncos were like 5th last. There was nothing really to get excited about besides the pure win-loss. And then this was also last. So, yeah, really, really hard to get hyped up about that part of the year. But also, you won games that you needed to. You can only play who's in front of you. So that's my thoughts there. Now, let's quickly go have a look here at the signings. So obviously, Ben Love at depth. He was at the end of this year. Alex Johnston's got next year before you got to start thinking about it. Murray's locked in long term. Campbell Graham's locked in long term. Cody Walker's got 1 more year left on him. So you are starting to think about your 6, your 7 kind of area. You definitely think about your 7, but you are starting to think, okay, well, what do we do? He's getting on in age now. How old is Cody Walker actually? How old is he? 33? He is 90. So that would be nearly 34. Yeah, he'd be 34 going into this year. Oh, no, sorry, 35 going into next year. He's 34 this year. Yeah, 1990, right? Yeah, so he would be 35 going into next year, 6th of March. Yeah, so when the season starts, he'll be going 35. So definitely getting on in age there. Obviously, Cookie has left. He is off to the Dragons. Dan Hawkins, Ewan Aiken obviously signed here from the Dolphins. Jerome Burns signed 2026. Isaiah Tass, I'm not too sure what's going on there with Tass and Thompson. Jack White signed 2027. That's fine. Host, you've got 1 more year left of him. Arrow, 2027. Signed Humphreys from Manly. Still got a couple of years left to think about Kalol Matangi, but I don't think you'd be getting rid of him, that's for sure. It's not a great deal you need to think about in regards to the signings, because the big ones that you've got here, majority of them are long-term to 2027. Majority of them. Tyrone Munro, I would be re-signing him ASAP till 2025. He is currently, he's got 1 more year there, which means in November, I believe he'll be able to be talking to someone. And guys, if there is contract updates that I'm not talking about here, feel free to let me know. But this is just from the NRL.com website, right? So yeah, this is a big one they'll be looking at. In regards to development list, Richard Kenner, Dion Talpa, Jerome Burns next year. Not too sure about Hayes and Mellors. Jacob Gagai has been a big part of their wing department this year. Thought it should have come in earlier, I thought. Liam LeBlanc, not too sure about. Max McCarthy and Thomas Fletcher, not too sure about those guys. So, development list is fine. Richard Kenner, shaky. Dion Talpa, I know might be a big thing going into the future. And Jacob Gagai has been a big part of them. Now, going into this year, the 2024 gains was Jack Whiten and Sean Keppie. Jack Whiten was always a huge one. I think that they were always expecting with Demetrio to have Lachlan Ellis as the 7, Cody Walker as the 6, and then Jack Whiten come into the centres to partner Campbell Graham, right? So Isaiah Tass's position was the one worrying. And this is what I'm trying to think from last year's perspective, yeah? So that was a good signing. Origin representative, great 14, can play 5'8", can play probably halfback, but I wouldn't really put him there. Can play obviously in the centres and did play a bit of fullback originally, didn't he? If I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty certain he did. But anyway, Jack Whiten, great signing. Don't get me wrong, great signing. Sean Keppie, on the other hand, I was a little bit confused by. I didn't think he was that fantastic at Manly, and I was really intrigued by this signing. I don't think he necessarily has worked out here with Manly, to be fair, but they did want to try and bolster those stocks, right? They did want to try and bolster the front row stocks, considering in 2024, they lost Hame Sele to the Dragons, Blake Taft to the Bulldogs, Jade Cartwright to the Knights, Josiah Karapani to the Broncos, and Daniel Saloka-Fafita to the Bulldogs. The big one there, Hame Sele, which is why you would see Sean Keppie also come in and do that little switcheroo. The back end of Tom Burgess's career as well. They did really need to utilise a rotation front row forward, but they kind of started him a lot more until they realised it wasn't really going well for them and Sean Keppie. Obviously, Hame Sele wasn't necessarily getting it done there at the Rabbitohs, to be fair. I can understand why they lost him there. Blake Taff went to the Dogs. I definitely understand why he wasn't needed there at the Rabbitohs with the amount of quality they had coming through in regards to Jai Gray and also they have Latrell Mitchell and whatnot. That made sense. Jed Cartwright, it's okay. Josiah Katapani, I thought it was okay. And Daniel Soluka-Fafita, I thought it was okay. So I didn't really necessarily disagree a great deal. I agree with Jack Whiten. Interested by Sean Keppie. Can kind of see the thought process behind it. But yeah, I just didn't believe in him as much as I guess the club did. 2025 gains. Jamie Humphries from Manly. Ewan Aiken from the Dolphins. Lewis Dodd from St. Helens. I feel like it might be somebody else, but if not, there's a little bit of concern about this. There's a little bit of concern about this for 2025. Jamie Humphries does look like a really nice young player coming through Manly. Played really well against him in the preseason when it was Manly versus Rabbitohs. Humphries was a big part of that. He is development, but obviously in the halves and a hooker and whatnot, he can do a great job there. So I'm obviously waiting to see Humphries and what he can provide if they do decide to go his direction, but obviously they do believe in him heavily. Ewan Aiken, definitely getting on in his career. He's been pretty much everywhere. Dolphins, Warriors, Dragons. He's been quite a few teams now, and is in 2025 going to the Rabbitohs. So let's just quickly go up here and see how old is Ewan Aiken. Oh, doesn't have it there. Doesn't have it. I'm not too sure. I would say he's around the 30-odd mark, though. 30-plus-year-old mark. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Let me know in the comment section. But it's a bit of how you go in. But then again, Wayne Bennett's bringing him across from the Dolphins. And obviously, you got to trust Wayne Bennett in that situation. And then in regards to Lewis Dodd, St. Helens, I'm never convinced in regards to backline players and spinal players besides maybe a hooker in regards to the Super League. I think that the forwards are usually awesome, but when it comes to spine and backline players and whatnot, Lewis Dodd, I'll wait and see, but I'm never convinced. I've seen plenty of backline players come across all kinds of teams, don't necessarily work out, but they're just trying to really salvage this half situation that is so confusing going into 2025. You don't necessarily know what Wayne Bennett is going to do there because he might just completely adjust this team, or he might just pick and choose. You never know. 2025 losses, Thomas Burgess to Huddersfield, Damien Cook to the Dragons. I do think this one is significant. I think that he has been thrown under the bus a little bit, kind of like Renault, actually, to go to the Dragons there. Obviously, Renault went to the Bronx and has killed it since. It's starting to get on now, but has killed it since. Damien Cook hasn't been at his pure best like he was 4 or 5 years ago. 3, 4, 5 years ago. But still has been their best hooker. So I'm really intrigued by what they're planning to do go forward here. Who is there? Who would be actually... Let's go have a look here who they finished off the year with. Let's go quickly have a look here at who was finishing off the year in the hooker. I think Damien Cook was finishing off the year as their hooker. Ooh, no! I hate when I click an ad. I hate when I click an ad there. Player stats. Rabbitohs. No, it's not player stats. I want to get team lineup. Team list. There we go. Yeah, the name was Damien Cook. Peter Mamouzelos. That's the one. Peter Mamouzelos, I think, is the guy that they're planning to, I guess, go with as their... as their hooker going forward. Is what I'm assuming. I'm pretty certain Peter Mamouzelos is that guy. So, yeah, that's a bold call to make, though. It's a very bold call to make there on behalf of the Rabbitohs to get rid of one of their long-standing hookers and whatnot. And Thomas Burgess obviously getting on in age. So, I don't disagree with this one. Great to see him score a try in his last game. Intrigued by this one because you need to hope that hooker coming through and Peter Mamouzelos is the guy you want going forward. So, the Rabbitohs in 2024, as their season review is definitely a fail. You know that. There's no debating that. I think that with Wayne Bennett coming in next year, you did see the positives in the middle part of the year when he originally signed. That the positives were players getting back to what we know they can. I do disagree with the situation in regards to Campbell Graham and how he's kind of... I'm not going to get too deeply into it, but I do think that his situation was handled incorrectly, personally, but what do I know? I'm not a trainer, I'm not a physio, I'm not all this, right? I think that Campbell Graham coming back into this team is huge. Obviously, Trell Mitt has been out for a long part of this year, and I think that's a big thing as well. With the Rabbitohs, right, and I'm going to compare this to my team, the Gold Coast Titans. Okay, let's go back to Jared Hayne 2016. Jared Hayne signs for the Rabbitohs. The media's all there, the media's all surrounding him, the media's all on top of Jared Hayne. That club can handle that kind of media spotlight, right? Because they're used to it over 100 16, 17 year period of being one of the big clubs, a lot of premierships, but a long time ago, one premiership in the last 50 years, but still a lot of premierships throughout the history, right? They are used to being one of the big Sydney clubs. So you get a player of that standard and that caliber, Jarryd Hayne, that club is able to control, as best as they can control it. Whilst a team like the Gold Coast Titans, they aren't necessarily used to being a big-time club with a big-time, media spotlight and all this type of stuff. So it can really impact them greatly. And it can impact the club so significantly that we saw what happened post-Jarryd Hayne and what happened throughout that. Because the media spotlight been on one player, players start to resent, players start to really pick it back, organisation, everything like that. It didn't work out. I don't believe that a club like the Gold Coast Titans could do that. And you could even go and say, some other teams as well in regards to that media spotlight. It's a difficult one. But the point of the matter is that the Rabbitohs and Latrell Mitchell, they can control that situation with the media and whatnot as long as it's not consistent and as long as it's not frequent throughout the year and throughout the years. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that Latrell Mitchell, who I defend, does need to take a bit more of a step back in regards to that villain approach. I think that he does need to take a bit more of a step back and understand and acknowledge that this is a collective and it's not just about Trell Mitt. And I don't know him personally, right? We chat sometimes on Instagram and whatnot, but I don't know him personally. So I'm not saying that he does have this massive ego and arrogance and whatnot, but from what we see in the media and what we see overall, what Trell Mitt does, what Latrell does have a gigantic impact on this team. If he's not playing, you're probably not going to tip the Rabbitohs. If he's playing, you still don't know what you're going to get because you don't know if there has been all this media spotlight and speculation and all this kind of jazz going into this game that usually can be controlled, but I think Wayne Bennett can do that comparatively to what Jason Demetriou could. I think Jason Demetriou handled a few situations incorrectly personally, but I think Wayne Bennett can just say, listen, shut up, this is my team, media, get out of my face. Do you know what I'm saying? Whilst Jason Demetriou will kind of go in depth into why they're wrong and defend his players and whatnot, which is great, but also sometimes you do need to kind of put the hammer down on a player. Not where you're offending them, but you just need to keep them relatively in line so that the team's not distracted by, let the Roosters be distracted, let the Titans be distracted, let the Tigers, let the Warriors, let all these teams cop all the bad media spotlight. Let's just kind of slowly focus our way under the radar. And then if something happens, cool, that's one instance, not like this instance and that instance and this instance and that instance. So I think that this team is really heavily revolved around a guy like Latrell Mitchell. And I think Wayne Bennett will be a massive benefit in regards to controlling that again. Because when Wayne Bennett was there, they were prelim, grand final, all this type of stuff, right? So, the point that I'm making there, this club can control that media spotlight, but it just can't be as frequent as it has been. So going into 2025, the key things here, control the spotlight. It's going to be on you with Wayne Bennett. It's going to be on you with Trell. And it's going to be on you with your season this year and the disappointment that this last couple of years have been realistically. You are going to have the spotlight control it as best as you can and limit the amount of spotlight that can be attributed to you. Number two, you got your injuries back. You've got one of the best coaches in the game there. Utilize the name on paper and translate it into the game of footy. Because on paper, this team is good. On paper, they do have a good team. The only issue is their halves and potentially their hooker. So actually, their spine is a little bit how you go on, but obviously Trell fullback, still questions about that, but you're not going to move him from there, right? Even though Jai Gray has been playing some really good footy there, but you've got good enough centres and whatnot. It's just, I know Cody Walker and Jack Whiten have been doing it, but I don't know about them as the halves pairing. Cody Walker is getting on in a bit of age. So, controlling spotlight, limiting spotlight, transitioning on paper to on field. And I think acknowledging the size of the club, but also I think you need to come together as a club. I think that this club and their fan base and the media team and whatnot do harp on about being the most successful team in history, which is correct. But I also feel that it sets up unrealistic expectations every single year based off of the history where if you think about it, they won a premiership 10 years ago. They have been in prelims and finals and whatnot in the last 5-6 years. But they have only won that one grand final in about 40, 50 years, right? And this is not an insult. It's just saying that a lot of the people from nowadays do talk as if they're this massively big team that is just constantly successful. And it's not true, because when I grew up in the 2000s and whatnot, they were the worst team in the comp. They were. And then they shaped themselves, they built themselves, they really rejuvenated themselves to be that team in 2014. And then were a consistent team for a while, and then now have lost their way. I just don't want their fans to set themselves up with unrealistic expectations every single year. Come together as a collective to understand who you are. You are a good team in the past. That doesn't mean that you are a good team now based off what has happened throughout the past. It doesn't mean jack. Yes, there is teams like the Storm, and there is teams like the Roosters, and there is teams like not the Panthers, sorry. There is teams that have been, even Manly, right? They're consistent, but when they have an off year, they kind of recognise it, they understand it, they go again. Rabbitohs, for mine, don't necessarily do that. So that's my, I guess, intriguing take. You know, that's my opinion. If you disagree with it, please comment below. You know, that's going to do us here for today, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Rabbitohs preview. Obviously, we're going through every single team in the NRL in this offseason, over the next couple of weeks, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, look, I think that's a relatively fair analysis there. Again, I'm going to get people commenting saying, oh, you don't, you've never won a competition before, which I get, and I'm understanding of that. But I do need to give you a fair analysis on my perspective in regards to the negatives of your team, but also the positives. Like, there is negatives, for sure, a lot of negatives. More negatives than most right now, but going into next year, there's a lot of positives. And there is a lot of hype and hope, but don't let it get to your head. Don't set unrealistic expectations. Be confident, but be aware, is what I would say. But alright guys, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here. Obviously comment in the comment section below what your thoughts are. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I want to hear your thoughts, absolutely. Jump into the comment section. I appreciate you as usual, and I'll see you guys for the next review, which will be the Parramatta of the Squeers, the Parramatta Eels. Alrighty guys, thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya!